welcome to our Yellowdig webinar today featuring Gayle Fischer of Salem State University. And welcome, Gayle. We'll get into introductions and things in just a moment. Bree, if you could move the slide along to the next slide. Here is our exciting agenda today. So we will share a little bit about Yellowdig because sometimes people come to these and they have never heard of Yellowdig. So it'll probably add a little bit of context to have some idea of what we're talking about here. Then Gayle will share some of her thoughts on using Yellowdig and being on the deaf spectrum and talking about how it's worked for her in that range. And Gayle and I will also have a bit of a discussion about her experiences using Yellowdig. And then if there's time, hopefully there'll be time, we'll take some questions. And now I guess we can move on to the next slide. What is Yellowdig? This is the question that's been pondering, people have been pondering for millennia, or at least for the last minute or two. So Yellowdig, in case you don't know, and even if you do know, Yellowdig is a digital learning platform. It's a learning community tool that creates vibrant learning communities. It uses gameful learning and sort of familiar social interface to really motivate students to get into community, to create really good, vibrant conversations that are relevant to whatever the course topic is and interesting to everyone in the course. And the point system that is involved in the gameful learning part of the system really motivates students to get in earlier and to create better content. And then the social frictionless sharing features and some of the other special design pieces of Yellowdig allow conversations to ebb and flow with what's interesting and important to students as that semester goes on. And certainly, I believe we have another webinar coming up I actually don't know what the date of it is, but it'll be at the end of the presentation where we'll talk a little bit more about the pilot opportunities that we're offering, and we'll go a little bit deeper into the platform itself. But suffice it to say that Yellowdig, again, is a learning community built up for the ground up for higher education that really works to grow student engagement and keep students interested and excited about what's going on in your course. So I think we can move on. Gayle Fischer. Well, I'll start by introducing myself so that you know why I'm talking. I'm Bob Erdischek. I'm Yellowdig's academic lead, and I work with our partners to help them get the most out of Yellowdig, to share best practices in pedagogy and provide ongoing support. And I'm going to introduce Gayle Fischer now. Gayle, why don't you tell us who you are?
So I'm a history professor at Salem State. My undergraduate degree is in theater. My master's degree is in women's history, and my PhD is in U.S. history. And I'm a Yellowdig groupie who just discovered Yellowdig this past summer and fell in love.
So Gayle, you know, let's start by asking, you know, what made you decide to use Yellowdig in the first place? Well, first of all, let's go back half a step. You're on the deaf spectrum, right? And you know, how does that impact what you do in your courses? You know, notwithstanding Yellowdig in general, how does that impact what you do in your courses? And then we'll get to, you know, how did you end up using Yellowdig?
Okay. So in the classroom, I haven't had very many accommodations. My primary accommodation has been a classroom that is carpeted and where the doors in the rear of the room to limit sound as much as possible. But when students speak, I never know if I'm going to be able to hear them. And I found myself over the years withdrawing, encouraging speaking in my class less and less, because sometimes I have to get like this close to students and ask them to repeat, you know, for the third time what they just said, because I still am not understanding or hearing all of the sounds. I've gotten to the point where sometimes I actually have to ask students to write down what they said because I'm just not getting it. And so it can be frustrating for students. It really puts a damper on discussion. Sometimes it's not uncommon for me to answer a question that wasn't asked, but answering a question that I thought I heard rather than a question that was asked. So it's a challenge in the classroom. Yeah.
And I want to say that I understand in two ways. First of all, in my own family, my father has had hearing loss, for my entire life and beyond, actually. And as I get older, I'm starting to encounter hearing loss. And in my time in the classroom, although certainly probably not as profoundly as you, I had trouble hearing my students, especially as they were sitting towards the back of the classroom. So I know that can be frustrating for all around. But you had made the classroom work, and in whatever ways. Yeah. And then what happened? 2020 happened. And what happened in 2020?
So classes were canceled at spring break, and we had to go remote. That spring semester, 2020, I just tried to get as much of my material online as possible. I wasn't thinking about anything, just having them read and quizzes, forget any kind of engagement. And then when we learned that we would be remote in the fall, I started to read online. How do you teach online? And almost every book, article that I read said, the first 2 weeks, you must build community. So I'm racking my brain, how do we build a community? So meanwhile, our IT department has supplied us with a list of, apps that they recommend. So I'm checking those out. And I actually decided on two of those. One was Flipgrid, which is sort of a fun video app. So students make short videos, they watch one another's videos, and they respond with video. I thought, well, if anything's going to make community, that will do it. Okay, love it. Put that in my syllabus. Then a hypothesis, which I used before in the past, but I thought I could work it in a different way at this time. So first semester, so the semester begins. And meanwhile, I had it happened on at Yellowdig in my searches, and it looked good, but I thought I just can't learn another app right now. I've found these two. And talked to Jim and said, maybe next semester when I have time to really look at this. So Flipgrid, I had 80 students in the classes, total 80 students in the classes using Flipgrid. So that meant I had to look at 80 students' videos, watch 80 students respond, 80, so all of the students are supposed to respond to the other. So 80 times 80, it was, I said, okay, this is not going to work.
A little overwhelming.
Then in hypothesis, which is supposed to be a kind of discussion oriented, but around annotating a document, students said the same thing. And it was like crushingly boring. I said, okay, this isn't going to work. Maybe I should go back and check that Yellowdig thing. That seemed like it might. So I got in touch with Jim. He had me do the tutorial, the teaching.
So you're talking about, Gail, you're just for people who are not aware, you're talking about our wonderful Education Partners representative, Jim Gandolfo.
Yes.
Okay. And right. So. Yeah. And so you went through our instructor certification course.
I did. And it was easy. I said, oh, I can do this. I mean, it wasn't like the other apps. I didn't want to use Canvas's. We use Canvas as our learning management system. And Canvas's discussion is just a it's sort of less, it's more torturous than a hypothesis.
And torture is not what we're going for in the classroom,
Exactly.
generally
I
speaking.
don't want to be tortured. I
Yeah.
don't mind torturing my students, but I don't want to be tortured.
So you went through the instructor certification course, and you thought that this will do some things in my classroom that these other tools wouldn't do. So what was it that you were hoping to get out of Yellowdig at that point?
Some discussion going, some engagement between students. I just it was even more apparent this semester than in the fall, because in the fall we were all, I think, very aware that this is remote learning, and this is new for many of it. I mean, talking about students as well as, so they were to a certain extent more patient with, trying. So here I had introduced them to these two apps, and they said, forget it, we're not doing those. But they were willing to go along and with the I guess the explosion of apps not working. So then introducing Yellowdig, I used it for my women's history class, and what happened was it really quite amazing to me, because the students really took ownership of. It might not have been what I had imagined would happen, but I followed all of the best practices that Yellowdig recommends. So I'm not going to, they say this works, I'm going to believe them, click that button. And it was an historic year for women's history, first vice president, female vice president. And there were also moments, Coney Barrett, a Catholic conservative woman, being named to the Supreme Court. So students were bringing in a lot of current events and things that interested them into the Yellowdig conversation. And I found that I was joining in the conversation, that I was able to contribute to the conversation.
And so, going back to your, being on the deaf spectrum and some of the issues that you already shared with us that, you faced in the classroom, the difficulty in having conversations, so this felt different to you?
So different that I asked my ADA officer if this could be one of my accommodations, because for the first time ever, really, I felt like I was able to engage with students, to communicate with them with no barriers, with my inability to hear not being an issue. And I could focus on what they were saying, albeit, in print, but there were exchanges, right? I would make comments, they would respond to my comments, they would post posts, and I might respond to those. It was like such an amazing experience for me. I've never had that before.
So, I think in our previous conversation, the term you used was that it was helpful in breaking down communication barriers.
Yes.
And how did these conversations evolve? I mean, what did you share with your students to get started?
You mean the assignments or the introducing them to Yellowdig?
Introducing them to Yellowdig, yes.
So in the fall, I think I did a better job in the spring, having had a semester of Yellowdig under my belt. In the fall, I think we all kind of just jumped in and weren't sure exactly what would happen. So I'm not sure that I prepared them adequately in the fall, but they really were a great group and jumped in with me, and they're I guess they use social media much more than I do. So they immediately, were able to make the connections with like Facebook, and it didn't seem foreign to them in the way, or artificial in the way that like the Canvas discussion, where I might post a question and then the instructions would say students have to respond to the question, and you have to respond to at least 2 students responding. It was what happened in Yellowdig was much more organic than that. It
And
wasn't my doing. I wish I could take credit for that, but it
well,
really is the way Yellowdig is set up.
and did you feel like you maybe got to know your students in a way that you hadn't previously?
That is one of the wonderful things about Yellowdig, is that their students become more real, which is funny because my classes are asynchronous, so I don't have a Zoom component because we didn't have closed captions. It's really difficult for me to use Zoom without closed captions. So we weren't coming together as a class in a Zoom-like, video conferencing. So we weren't seeing each other's faces, except on Yellowdig, where I asked them to, make sure they posted their picture in their profile. And so I got to know them in a way that was very different. Their interests, depending on what they posted, their insights into, they became real people. I wasn't focused on grading. I wasn't focused on checking off a rubric, making sure they said this, they said that, the way I would be in a Canvas discussion, where I would post a question and expect, them to make certain connections. In Yellowdig, really they carry the burden, and they talk to me. They'll say something, maybe several students will say something, and then I might chime in, and then they might respond to me or disagree with me. I feel like students were felt less inhibited
And
about expressing themselves.
awesome. And so do you feel like, one of the senses that I often have in my face-to-face classes was that while, I, as an instructor, was doing my best to engage with everybody, the students were only engaging with, the few people next to them, and maybe, and not really beyond that. Did you get the sense that students were also finding it as a way to interact and communicate and create community with each other?
They were actually, this semester, there is really some, there've been some delightful posts. So one young man, this was fairly early in the semester, we were talking about the pandemic, and he was talking about how hard it is to make friends, and how he was transferring to UMass in Amherst, and he was worried about what it would be like, how would he meet people, and the other students in the class are just sort of encouraging him, giving him advice. It was incredibly endearing. So the students connect with each other in class. I often have exercises where I have them in small groups, so they do interact with one another. But then you try to get them back in the bigger groups so that they then interact with the whole class. It's still, now having experienced Yellowdig And looking back at those experiences, it seems to me that that still sort of rings false, that the students, I don't tell them that they have to interact with anyone on Yellowdig. They do. It's different.
And so, I mean, so that they're building this community, they're interacting with you, they're interacting with each other. But then again, we have to go back to the course itself. What did Yellowdig add to women's history, or what did Yellowdig add to your other courses?
U.S. history this semester.
U.S. history, yeah. So I mean, what was the role that Yellowdig played in facilitating learning, I suppose, is the question.
Okay. So one of my big things is connections, right? So often students go in, do the reading, do the homework, leave and forget it. I always want them to be able to connect what's going on in the classroom, to either the wider world, their own lives. And they've given me amazing examples of how they're making connections without even realizing it. I don't think they realize that they're making these historical connections until they have to choose a topic, right? So I wrote, I have topics and they're required to put a topic on their posting.
So I just want to clarify for people who may not know Yellowdig really quickly. So topics in Yellowdig are tags that are defined by the instructor, whoever creates the course, that students then can be required to add to each and every post. And this allows conversations to ebb and flow, to be able to find those conversations, to have them reemerge when things come up that are relevant and all that. But again, the primary part is it makes it easier to find those conversations, but it also makes students, Gail, right, think about what they're bringing into the community and where in the course it belongs. It's really one of my favorite things in Yellowdig as far as facilitating learning goes, to talk about it. And so that's what we're talking about when we mention topics. And I was thinking, since we're on that sort of, actually, before we get to some of the things, so your topics, what were your topics like? What were some examples of topic names that you used, just for benefit of the audience?
And this is as for, you want to, according to Yellowdig, you want to have your topics before your class starts. So you really have to think, because you don't want them to be too specific. So one of the topics is historical connections.
And so I think that we have a slide showing some of how that may have worked. And so this is from a post in Yellowdig, Gail? This slide?
Yes.
So why don't you tell us what's going on here?
So in some ways it's self-explanatory. This is a student who posted. This is her post. So some students will write paragraphs and paragraphs. This one's fairly short. She's talking about reading about Ethan Allen in the textbook, and she then makes a connection to the furniture store that she passes on her commute, which is I had never made this connection between the Ethan Allen furniture store and Ethan Allen. So then she, although it's not included in this particular post, she then goes on and researches to find out if the Ethan Allen in her textbook is in any way connected to the Ethan Allen of the store that she passes, and discovers that in fact there is a connection. But I'll let you all discover that on your own. But she also ends her post with questions to her classmates, and they this is the thing too with Yellowdig. If a post resonates with students, they respond. And so she's asking her classmates, do you know of any other businesses like that? Is there any other historical figures that you can think of? And so then they, you know, respond, oh, that never occurred to me, or they listed some other figures that came to mind. But it was a very popular post, and she chose historical connections, which is exactly what that is.
So just for those of you in the audience who I'm going to show off my very incredibly limited remembrance of Ethan Allen. He was the leader of the Green Mountain Boys, a militia that fought in the Revolution, correct? And you know, so this got that student thinking a little bit deeper about that. That student will never forget Ethan Allen again, and you know, who knows, he may be buying some furniture in the future too, for all we know. But the connection has been made in their mind that there's some sort of relevance related to the subject matter that you're talking about. I kind of want to move on to the next. I think it's the next slide, the one, Andrew. Yes, that's the one. You know, and I thought the first one was cool in that it creates a connection between then and now, and you know, but this one, this post about Andrew Jackson, and certainly the thoughts about Andrew Jackson are all. I mean, people have various opinions of Andrew Jackson for various reasons, but this post I thought was interesting, particularly because not only does it relate to a historical connection, but it's a historical connection to the politics of today, I thought is and you know, can you tell us a little bit more about this particular situation?
So again, with no prompting from myself, this student drew a historical connection between a reading from the textbook and what's going on in what was going on in the elections. And what started is the discussion that it's actually still ongoing about the discussion has evolved into a discussion about presidential candidates being out of touch with the common people. So Andrew Jackson, they're talking, the response is that, you know, he's more like the common person, or in this case, he says unconventional. But in talking about current presidents, students were trying to see how come they're all rich now, right? Although Andrew Jackson was wealthy as well. But he at least fostered that kind of common person identity. And students weren't seeing that anymore in candidates. It's and he brought up George Bush, Nixon comes up, Trump, of course.
And so the students followed up on this. They had a conversation about it. It wasn't just this initial post.
Oh, right. No, they're both of the examples you're seeing here are posts that had not only do the students make historical connections, but they also generated a great deal of discussion among the students. And we can talk about points here, because the one of the things students want to post interesting posts, because the more people who respond to their post, the poster gets points, as well as the writer of responses.
So that's great. That's exactly where I was going to ask, talk about next. You mentioned in our conversations that you enjoyed the fact that the discussions were grade free, but you didn't have to use a rubric to find, to grade every post. But students do get, they are still measured on those posts to some degree, through the point system. And in order to achieve whatever the the participation grade in your course was they had to earn enough Yellowdig points to get that. And if I just want to ask really quickly, what was the percentage, the participation percentage that you, or the percentage of the grade that went to Yellowdig?
Yeah.
I guess is the way I'm.
So I've always been a big advocate of participation and attendance. So when that ceased to exist in the remote classroom, I used the same percentages that I used to use for those with Yellowdig, and that's 25% of the grade.
So it's a big chunk of the grade.
Yeah.
Students, I assume, understood that was important to getting a passing grade in the course, to be in the Yellowdig, and it seems to me that based on what you said, that the points system starts off as the extrinsic motivation to make sure that they're in the platform, but they learn because of the two types of points in Yellowdig, and this is again for the benefit of the audience to some degree.
Yes.
There's the participation points, which are the points that people get for typing a certain number of words for a post or a comment. But what really makes the difference, and probably led to, and you can confirm this or not, creating better posting, better, more interesting posts, were the social points, the points that they get when other people comment on their posts. That's what.
Yes. Because if I just like with there are always students who object to participation attendance grades. They don't believe that they can learn from their classmates. Yeah, that they should only be learning from their professor. And so there are students who resist. Why do I have to rely on others for my grade? And I say, well, you don't really have to rely on others. You could. You don't ever have to create a post. You can just respond to other posts and accumulate your points that way. But it's really exciting when a post does take off, and then the original author also gets re-engaged, gets involved in the discussion that develops from the original post. I think just from the positive comments students have given me, they feel important. Somebody thought that what they had to say was worth reading and commenting on. It makes them feel good, I think.
So actually, Bree, if you could bring up, I think there's a slide that relates to some of the feedback that Gail got. Do you want to pull that one up?
These were just so I rarely create a post, but every now and then I might. I can't remember what I shared with them, but they really liked it. But they also mentioned, I hope this won't be my last time experiencing Yellowdig. I really enjoyed working with Yellowdig after I figured it out and stayed on top of it. I mean, that was it's been one of the things I've thinking about when I go forward into the fall, is that on Canvas, students often rely exclusively on the calendar. And I have one, again, following best practices in Yellowdig, one Yellowdig conversation assignment. I have many links to that one assignment, but the due date is technically the last day of class. And so I remind students, I'll post an announcement in Canvas reminding them that they need to post to Yellowdig. I've even sent individual emails to students reminding them that 25% of their grade is on Canvas. I recently posted on Yellowdig, saying, I'm going forward in the fall with Yellowdig. Those of you who are on Yellowdig, obviously this doesn't apply to you, but how do I get everyone in class to participate? How come some people aren't participating in Yellowdig? Any suggestions for how to get them to sign up and contribute? So far, I just posted it. So the only response I have so far is it's an assignment, like it's an assignment. Why aren't they posting? The student was like dumbfounded. She said, this is fun. It mixes social media and historical content. I don't know why they aren't posting.
And I mean, so I mean, I think it does start with sort of that extrinsic motivation. I think to some degree, it's incumbent on the instructor to share at the beginning of using Yellowdig what the purpose of having this Yellowdig community is, and what the role of the of the instructor is going to be in there, as well as what the expectations of the students are, and sharing that up front can go a long way to doing that. But that makes me sort of want to ask you, what did you see your role? What did you see as your role in the community? What how did you approach that?
I felt more like a member of the community than an instructor. I'll tell you in a minute about my attempt at formal assignments. As I said, in general, I will, and I might encourage students to comment on something that we do in class on Yellowdig, but I rarely, I've only tried 2 formal assignments, and I'm with mixed success. But I saw myself more as a member of this community, participating in the discussions, so that, or bringing in an alternative view, or perhaps correcting a misinterpretation, but doing it in a way that I wasn't saying you're wrong, doing it in a conversational, really friendly manner, that a student doesn't huff off and feel offended. Have you ever thought about this? Or that's an interesting perspective, but I always thought, or you're using language to encourage students to continue to think, but perhaps correct some of their errors.
So it seems again that you're sort of following at least what we consider our best practices, in that,
yes, my Bible,
in that we consider these communities to be instructor modeled rather than instructor led. The instructor has a role in the community as a citizen of the community, and certainly, a little bit more knowledge about what's going on there. And students do want to feel heard. And I think that you've sort of achieved that balance in there. And the other thing that sort of strikes me is that it sounds, based on everything you said, that having this community really did mitigate any communication issues, and that doesn't necessarily mean only your hearing issues. I mean, the issues of students understanding what you're saying and having the ability to easily have you address them, whenever, if necessary. Or did you allow students to answer each other's questions as well in the community, or did you encourage that type of behavior?
I really have. Well, you saw with the 2 historical connection examples, students ask their classmates questions in original posts, and in someone posted something like they were talking about a historical it wasn't a museum, it was an historical site. And they asked, what is your favorite Massachusetts historical site? And then somebody mentioned something. I've never been to, talk about Plymouth Rock. So then there's this big discussion about Plymouth Rock because some people had been, some hadn't, and we all, and then I joined in because I saw it when I was 10, and there you go, and you look down and there's this rock. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But some of my students I felt quite moved by that rock. But it was so it really is a conversation. I would never get this in a classroom. If I ask a question, somebody answers, I say, any other thoughts? Anyone else have anything to say? And we're all sitting there looking at each other. But they're talking to me, right? They're not talking to each other. Even though you're hoping that they will, and sometimes you get it, but not often. On Yellowdig, it's mostly them. I pipe in when something interests me, or they say something that I want to respond to. But it's really they're driving
So
the discussion.
So the one thing that we haven't talked about yet that I think is, at least from my perception, is really important is, what did Yellowdig do for you as an instructor? How did it shape what you were teaching? In other words, did what the conversations in Yellowdig inform your teaching and cause you to take particular types of actions to address what you saw happening?
Right. So again, I want to remind you that I'm still a newbie. It's only my second semester, and so but I am already thinking about what have I learned this semester? How will I do it differently in the fall? Now, one of the things I tried were a couple of formal assignments. Right, I had excerpts from textbooks from different countries talking about the US Constitution. And I was going to make that a regular assignment on Canvas where each student independently on their own had to read those and answer the questions. So I said, I wonder if this would work on Canvas. On Yellowdig. I was going to say the answer is no, except today before we met, I looked, I went through Yellowdig and posted the most active topics. And even though this question was like 6 weeks ago, some reason now students are reading and responding to it, even though I thought, all right, this is something that didn't work. Maybe it needed time to ferment with them. I don't know why they're suddenly picking up on that assignment and answering. So I have to think about last semester and this semester. I really let students determine how we would use Yellowdig. I'm thinking about ways that I might, without this balance, without interfering, because I love how much they own Yellowdig. I sort of guide the discussion sometimes, in a particular direction. And then so I'll be looking at Yellowdig examples, other people, how they use it, and looking for suggestions.
So if I may, I just want to, comment. I think that's great. And I think that you should feel free. I think any instructor in Yellowdig should feel free to, ask the questions that are interesting to that instructor in the community. Be a person in the community just as a student would in that regard. Obviously, you have a little bit more power in that you can direct, sort of where you want that to go. But one of the great things about a community like Yellowdig is that you get to share a little bit of the passion that you have for the subject matter, right? And commenting on students' posts is a great way to sort of do that, or to ask the question that's specifically related to your very own interests. And then finally, before we move on to questions, and I don't know the answer to this question, so I don't know if you had the opportunity or if you tried using any of our data tools, the community health platform or the network graph. Did you?
Where I look to see how many times students have, or which students have contributed.
Well, so the community health area shows you a number of metrics related to the strength of your community on sharing, listening, and interacting relative to other Yellowdig communities. The network graph can show you exactly who is interacting with who and the strength of those connections. And you can often find outliers and use that as a tool to bring them back into the conversation. And I don't know that if you, as you were relatively new to the platform, if you had fully had the opportunity to explore those.
I would like to use them more. I have used them to locate the students who hadn't been contributing, or I have two sections of U.S. history. One section, when I looked at the difference in the data from one section to the other section, I was horrified. And so I said to the other section, "Oh my God, what's going on with you people?" The other section is just, running a riot over you. They're fun, they're engaging, you all aren't participating in Yellowdig. Start participating. It's 25% of your grade. And that class, so I have one class that's much more engaged than the other. There are great contributions in both classes, but it's clear that one class has clicked in a way with one another in a way that the other class hasn't. And it's not surprising that the one that I think clicked as strongly is the one where I have had to nudge students more.
And you can use some of that data to tell you that and to jump in. So I want to get to questions because we only have about 10 minutes left, but I want to just clarify something for myself and for the audience. Moving forward, when you're going back to face-to-face courses, do you intend to use Yellowdig in your face-to-face courses?
It's now officially one of my accommodations. Because of the way it breaks down the barriers to communication, and because of the way the discussion is able to blossom on Yellowdig, even if it wasn't one of my accommodations, I would, I guess, I plan, you better be around for a long time because I plan on continuing to use Yellowdig. I can't imagine now not using it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Gail. I think we do want to take some questions that we have a little bit of time. And then I think there might be a couple of other announcements that Bree might want to make about upcoming events also. But let's, I guess, get right to the questions. Jim, do you have anything that you want to surface to us on from the chat? Because I haven't had the opportunity to really be in there.
There was one question about from, I can't remember who, but it was, can you comment on how you as the instructor balance giving specific prompts that you want students to respond to with having topics and letting students direct the discussion as they wish?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The really simple answer to that is that we don't encourage the use of sort of weekly prompts in Yellowdig. We want Yellowdig to create an organic community with real conversations, as opposed to the feeling of the need to have students responding only to the instructor and really what becomes ultimately a publicly submitted written assignment that's for a grade. That being said, as I think we've mentioned, Gail and I, to some degree, it is fair game for the instructor to go out there and to ask whatever questions are important to the instructor, but without the expectation that students are going to need to respond to that specific post. I mean, in my mind, when you're using Yellowdig community, if you want to have a student response to a specific question and have all students respond to that, perhaps that should just be a different assignment. That and you can surface those in the Yellowdig community and vice versa. But we view Yellowdig as a learning community rather than something that is for where you to submit those prompted discussions. I hope that makes some sense. I'd strongly urge anyone who wants to learn more about that than I can share in this very short period of time to check out our Instructor Certification course, which is free, and only takes about an hour of your time. And maybe, Jim, you can pop that link in the chat at some point.
I agree with you about the prompts. It changes the whole nature of Yellowdig. It becomes more like Canvas discussion, because then you must answer this question and you have to make sure that all of the students respond. Even if you ask an exciting question, a student's answer might send the discussion in a totally different direction, right? I mean, because the students are reading each other's responses.
It's cool. So I see Annette, unless you had something else you wanted to surface, Jim, I see Annette posted a question in the Q&A area, and I'm going to respond to that if that's all right. I had a lot of success initially when I invited students to introduce themselves. After that, a lot of students asked what I should write about in Yellowdig. Are there other types of general post invitations that move a community along, or at least those members of it who don't take to it naturally? And Annette, again, I want to go back to that idea of instructor modeling what types of behavior you want. And I think it's especially important, as I think I might have said earlier, that at the outset of any Yellowdig community, that you as the instructor share what the purpose of the community is, why you've brought it in here, and share as well what your role in the community is and what you're expecting of the students. And part of that could be using that the posting mechanism to create an initial video as a first post that you perhaps pinned at the top, where you take that opportunity to humanize yourself a little bit and maybe share the type of thing that you want them to share going forward. And for further examples of that, I would be explicit in telling students what I'd like you to do is share things that you find relevant that are happening in the real world, share your own life experience as they are relevant to the conversation, and to, that conversations don't have to end at any particular time during the community. That's the value of the topic tags, is the conversations can ebb and flow. In a history class or in my own political sciences class, that's especially true because things happen in the news all the time, and you may have talked about it in week 2, but that conversation then can reemerge in week 7 or something like that because something happened. So I hope that's a very basic answer to what you were looking for, Lynette. Anything else you want to surface, Jim? Or do you have any comment on that, Gail?
I was just going to say that being in the first weeks, as the instructor, responding, to student postings in a really encouraging way seems to also make students less fearful, because this is it's very different from any other kind of discussion that they've engaged in, and they're afraid of doing it wrong.
I mean, it's different. It's different from any kind of classroom discussion.
Right.
Not different from other types of.
No, a good point. Yeah, good point.
So we've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to invite Bree back to share what we have going forward. If you'd be able to do that, Bree. And here it comes. And so we have a demo webinar for those of you who are new to Yellowdig. I think I mentioned this at the outset. I wasn't sure of the date, but now I am, May 1st. And you'll get a much more in-depth view than the 2 seconds that I spent on the platform today. You'll be able to see exactly how it works and why it works and our pedagogy and best practices. And we also have a brand new ebook that we encourage you to download and take a look at. It's instructor perspectives on how they've used Yellowdig and what results they've gotten. And we'll leave this up so that you can use your iPhones or Android phones to scan those QR codes to get to them. But before we go, I just want to thank Gail very much for sharing her story and her experiences with Yellowdig. And it's reaffirming for me as someone who works at Yellowdig to hear stories like yours, but because it really does point out exactly, frankly, why I'm at this company, because this tool can expand the classroom in ways that you're not going to be able to find otherwise, that it can really create opportunities for learning that you don't get 50 minutes 3 times a week in a face-to-face class. And it can knock down some of the barriers, whether it's related to hearing or the fact that someone's sitting in the front of the class with the cool kids and someone sitting in the back of the class with the
cool kids.
I don't know. I think they're all cool. But yeah. So thanks again for being with us, Gail, and I hope you'll keep in touch and let us know how it continues to go.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. It's fun.
Our pleasure.
I just wanted to jump in and mention that Gail is also featured in the ebook. So if you want to read a little bit more about Gail, make sure you jump into that book too.
All right. And anything else that we want to cover today, or shall we call it a day?
That sounds great. I think there was one question about a 1-minute pitch for what makes Yellowdig different from a normal discussion. And I think we have about a minute left. So if you want to tackle that, Bob, as a quick sales practice challenge.
Let me take a deep breath and so unlike a discussion board, Yellowdig creates a vibrant learning community. It allows students agency to share their own life experiences, to highlight what's relevant to them related to the course discussions, related to what's going on to the course, and to be able to be in or out of the class 24/7, whenever it comes up, whatever it means, and to interact with people beyond those few people that they would normally in a face-to-face class, or even frankly in a standard online course. So that's my quick real pitch, and to do it in a way that they're actually going to like and feel like it's not a forced conversation, where I think the word Gail used was organic. So I guess we'll leave it at that. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.